I know I'm having you read, you're doing chapter 4 this week, and I wanted to talk a little bit about comprehensible input. And comprehensible input for ELLs obviously is huge. It's the whole point of, interacting with the students and communicating with them so they understand. I think it's important to say that it's good to reflect on how fast you speak when you're working with ELs, English learners. Are you a fast talker? I feel like we're doing Seinfeld, is you a close talker, a high talker, a fast talker? I always notice that Spanish, it seems too fast for me when I'm trying to listen to it, even though I speak Spanish. I don't pick up the whole message. So I get confused and I get overly frustrated. So you don't want to speak too slowly, but you want to speak naturally. And of course, you want to repeat and you want to paraphrase. You want to explain it 2 or 3 different ways. One of the examples in the video, obviously they have learning objective, or they have content objectives and language objectives. And you share those with the students, and they write those down. They should be able to repeat them back to you, even paraphrase them back to you. And then you correct, you make sure everyone in the class understands, including students who may have very limited English. You try to make sure they're not in a content class that's too far over their ability, or that they have a para or somebody that helps them. I am a great believer in paraphrasing a lot, and not, unless it's individual words, trying not to translate too much. You don't want to just be translating constantly, even if you have someone that can do that, or you can do that. In chapter 4, you talk about graphic organizers. A lot of this is what you would have anticipated, especially as an elementary teacher. You would have learned this. But redundancy, repetition is huge, both in what you put on the walls and what's on your PowerPoint or your multimedia. So it has everything from sentence strips, which is pretty old-fashioned, to having students check each other for understanding. You want to do this in an efficient way. You don't want to spend 20 minutes going over the language objectives. But there's one example, and I can't think if it's in this chapter because I'd have to, or in this video section, but the lady actually wears a word on her chest that's the key word for understanding. And I think it's the one where they look for iron in the multi-grain Cheerios, and they're actually looking for pieces of iron, because they're using magnets to find out that there really is literally iron in cereal. It's not a theoretical iron. You can actually find the pieces of iron, which shocked the heck out of me. You're very tiny. Maybe I'll crumble those tonight in my white milk, and I'll get a magnet, see how my shredded wheat has iron in it. I think somehow it, unless I'm Iron Man, it doesn't sound very munchy. But a lot of comprehension deals with repetition. And I think a real focus needs to be on seeing that your written instructions or your handouts also correlate with words that you use, and that your any difficult words or new words are explained, and maybe explained more than once. I forgot what that rule is, but you need to hear something 5 to 8 times before it sinks in. And for ELs, it could be even more often. But redundancy is very, very big. Probably when you speak always, little things. It's almost like a speech teacher, but you face them, you enunciate the word, you don't speak too slowly. You give them visual representation of what you're saying, and that there's a pattern. It reflects speaking, listening, hearing, and writing can all be included, not on every single activity, but certainly within the context of the lesson. That's really all I have to say about comprehensible input. You must have it, because without it, the student's not going to know what's the point of the class. So any conversations, you may even set up sentence fragments or sentence parts that the student fills them in, so they get it's a little bit of the drill. You don't want to drill students to say this after me over and over, but they may have a sentence either completely or partially done with some open space in it where they put their answer. A little bit of fill in the blank. I don't like any of this on worksheets, because it's kind of but if I've even thought you can even construct little conversations that if you have very weak students in terms of speaking, you can create little dialogues that they could practice. And then they would apply the practice. They would use it where they're no longer looking at the dialogue. They're just literally saying that, oh, I realize there are several, I just found iron in the multi-grain cereal. Or if it, there are 3 colonies that did not sign the Bill of Rights. So you could set up a little STEM sentence that could help students that are struggling and differentiate. It would give them a little script to use whenever they weren't quite sure what to do. And I'm a big believer in these, because it's like a scaffold. You give them something. If I'm trying to speak in French and I'm not very good, but I can read it and pronounce the words, but I may not quite catch the expression. I mean, I know in French I have a terrible problem with almost any of it, because it seems so fast, but it sounds so cool when it comes off the tongue. So I'm a believer in building. You always pay attention to comprehensible input. You give the student a variety of ways for them to also guess and to grasp understanding, and in some practice and repeating it. I think that's about all I have to say about comprehensible input. You can pre-teach vocabulary and have kids pronounce it, but the words need to be within some context, and the sentences need to be using the words. They must have some application of the words, especially if you're talking about something scientific, or maybe teaching about U.S. government or how a bill becomes law. There's a series of sentences say first this, this, and this, and this. That could be how to give directions to get to your home. First, you go down 2nd Street and go straight until you get to Maple Avenue. Then you turn right and go on Maple Avenue until, so you can see that even with something like giving directions, which is a pretty basic thing you'd want students to be able to do, even young students that are, just being able to tell someone where their home is so they could communicate this information. Those are my thoughts on that. I just wanted to give you a short video going over that for this TEA 26 class.